Real quick before we jump into today's second half, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you're spending it with family, having some corned beef, cabbage, potatoes and carrots, a boiled dinner, or if you're going out and being festive. Either way, please be safe, responsible, because I would definitely not want anything to happen to anyone. So just enjoy your day and have a great one. Let's get into it. Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It's absolutely free, does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, it only takes a second. And please, leave a comment. All these things really do help, and guys, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get into tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. I've been tempted to share this for a while now. The following occurred on an island off of Washington State about 7 years ago. My sister, her family, moved from Oregon to Washington. I tagged along to check it out. It was different there. The woods in Oregon had a welcoming fantasy forest feeling, whereas the woods in Washington felt ominous, foreboding, especially at night. You could really feel the woods out there, if that makes any sense. It was late afternoon. I was just chilling on the sofa at my sister's new place when she says she found out about a trail on this island. It was already late afternoon, but we said, what the hell, let's go check it out. Her husband wasn't up for it, but he agreed to drop us off and pick us back up. My oldest niece also decided to go with us. It's about 15 minutes away, so we grabbed a handful of things and off we went. We were walking and talking, enjoying the quiet. It was a simple trail, nothing special so far. We get to this enormous tree that must have been 6 feet around. It's in the middle of where the trail splits off into two directions. One leads to the seashore and one leads further into the woods. So we head towards the sea. We hang out there for a bit, taking in the view and shooting the breeze before we start to head back. We get to the big tree and we decide to check out the other trail leading off into the woods. We're having a nice time. We have the trail entirely to ourselves. We're laughing, kidding around, enjoying each other's company and this beautiful day. I don't remember who brought it up, but someone. And somehow Bigfoot comes up. Jokingly, I pick up a big stick and start whacking it against a random tree on the side of the trail. Instantly, about 20 yards off this trail, before I'm even done with my second whack, a very loud wood-rapping sound begins hammering a tree. Fast. When I say fast, I mean death metal blast beat fast, and incredibly loud. We can't see anything there, though, and suddenly it stops. We stand there startled. I think my niece said something about a woodpecker, and we agree and move on. From here on, you may say I'm making too much out of nothing, or that we're idiots. You had to be there. You know, the whole woods go silent thing. Well, they were already quiet, but something had shifted. The atmosphere had changed. We weren't laughing now, uneasy, but we kept going and slowly started relaxing and chatting again. Then, from somewhere up above us, between the treetops and the sky, a monkey started screaming. We froze. Everyone knows that sound. It's unmistakable. Wah-ah-ah, raising louder and higher, like laughter moving closer and closer, and as it passes above us, it seamlessly morphs into a crow cawing. But though we followed that sound as it passed overhead, we didn't see anything. We kept moving, and no one says anything. We silently agree to move back towards the exit. We finish the loop we were on and head back in the direction of the big tree. Instead, we end up on a part we don't recognize. You know where this is going. We spent the next hour or so backtracking and pretending there isn't a speed of panic in our gut. It's getting darker and the temperature is dropping. We focus on the situation and keep our cool. Finally, up ahead, I see that big tree and we're all relieved. As we are heading towards it, we hear the children. You know the sound of a big group of kids bursting out of a school door, laughing like that, heading toward the seashore. I was relieved to hear people. We round the big tree and start heading up the main trail toward the exit. My sister calls her husband and tells him to go ahead and come get us. Up ahead of us is a bend, and from around that bend comes two dogs. One big guy, one little dog, dragging leashes. They stand there just looking at us. As we approach the bend, they both turn around and go back. About 20 seconds later, we round the bend expecting to greet the owners, and there was nothing. No dogs, no people. It's a straight shot up to the next exit from there. The sides of the trail are about 8 feet high and steep. There's nowhere anyone could have gone. That's when I remember the kids. It's getting dark soon. Where are they? Why would a crowd of kids be going to a random isolated seashore at this time of the day? Then it occurs to me that we didn't hear any footsteps. A crowd of kids would have made much more noise, especially moving at that speed. Also, there were no footprints of anyone but us. Her husband has by then shown up and is waiting with an engine running. Also there, right before we exit the gate, a powerful stench of something dead and rotten hits me. I glance up to my left in the direction it's coming from, and I feel a force of pure malevolence shoot right through me, like nothing I had ever felt in my life. Absolute and passionate hatred aimed directly at me. My nose and eyes are glued to the spot, but there's nothing there. We get in the car and pull away. And that was it. And that's the part that bothers me the most, because none of us said a thing. As soon as we shut the doors, it was like it never happened. We started talking about dinner and watching a movie, etc., like nothing happened. It wasn't till later that night, alone looking at some snapshots that I took on the hike, that I started to piece it together. On a whim, I messaged a friend, Joe, who was into weird stuff, and tell him a short version of the events. He never replied, and I forgot about it. Over the years, and a few phones later, I never deleted that message. It was like a blank spot sat where my memory of it should be. I could only remember it clearly when I reread it. Another strange thing is that both my sister and I are into Bigfoot and 411, yet we never once discussed it. I brought it up once a couple of years ago, something like, "Remember that weird trail we went on?" Her only reply was, "I'll never go on that trail again," and that was that. It never came up again. Hearing a monkey scream in the forest was the most scared I have ever been in my entire adult life. What sticks with me the most, however, at the end, it was a hatred I can't describe. Just emanating like that stench accompanying it. Just absolute, total hatred directed at me, not my sister, not my niece. Whatever it was wanted me to know that it was me, that it despised me completely. That it would have been there at the finish line no matter what. So, don't go stir things up. You aren't and won't be in control. And scariest of all, it fucking hates you. Today's second encounter. My girlfriend and I were faced with a very strange situation that we cannot fully rationally explain. I believe we were being hunted by something in these mountains. Just to provide some quick background on myself to try to gain some credibility, I'm an avid hunter with both day and nighttime experience, and I've been hunting since the age of 9. I'm also a first-degree black belt with experience in hand-to-hand combat, knife training, stick training, and gun tactics. My girlfriend and I are both avid backpackers and have hiked over a 100-mile section hike on the Appalachian Trails. I myself am also an avid rock climber and mountaineer. We both are very accustomed to the outdoors and the wildlife that inhabits it. That being said, what occurred that night was like nothing I have ever experienced before. Something very intelligent was out there with us. My girlfriend was the first to hear two-legged footsteps around the camp, off in the woods behind the tent. She thought nothing of it, as it could have just been the sound traveling from another hiker hiking along the Colima Trail east of our location, as sound does tend to resonate through the mountains/woods. Throughout our hike during the day into the site and our smaller hike around the south rim after we dropped our packs off at the campsite, we only saw day hikers on the trail. Two groups, one father, son, and another group of four. No one else with packs, which would indicate they were spending the night on the mountain. We also heard nothing else until things started to get weird later that night. So we were fairly certain that we were the only ones camping there on the entire mountain range for that night. As experienced hikers, we know to put anything and everything that has a scent into a bear box. Food, water, snacks, sunscreen, deodorant, toothpaste, toothbrush, bug spray, sweaty clothes, everything. I woke up around midnight because my leg had fallen asleep, and I needed to adjust my position to get some blood flow back into it. As I move to reposition, I hear a noise from just outside of the tent. Arms reach from it, scurry off quickly into the woods behind the tent. If I had accidentally scared it, I didn't think much of it, as it's common for wildlife to approach campsites. However, what struck me as odd as I could have sworn it sounded like a bipedal animal. But still, nonetheless, this is bear and mountain lion territory, and bears are known to walk on two legs for short distances. However, now I'm awake. I continue lying still, listening for another hour. The two-legged footsteps come back. The creature approaches from the same woods from behind the tent. I can tell as it closes into the campsite perimeter due to the gravel rock chips that line the entire campsite. As the creature comes into arm's reach of the tent, the sound of the footsteps pause. As if it's dragging a stick behind it, it walks around the perimeter of our tent. About 2/3 around. If coming from behind the tent is 12 o'clock, it's now in the 7 or 8 o'clock position. At this point, I'm freaked out. There's no animal in my mind that would walk on 2 feet for this long and be smart enough to drag a stick behind it as it circles our tent. As the tent's about 15 yards from the bear box with all the food inside, but clearly this creature has no interest in it, just the tent. I'm thinking this has to be a human and they're just toying with us. The creature stops in the 8 o'clock position and the sounds of the footsteps subside. Judging from the sound difference from it being point blank from the tent to now, it's probably 5 to 8 feet away from a tent. At this point, I get into an upright position, find my black diamond headlamp with a spotlight of around 30 yards. Grab the only weapon I have with me, a full tang hunting knife, approximately 5-inch blade, and wake up my girlfriend. I relay to her something that is 5 to 8 feet away from the tent and point to the direction. She's tired, a bit annoyed, and says it's probably an animal. I tell her the footsteps don't match up. She's not convinced and goes back to sleep. Side note, the tent has a rain fly on it and is fully zipped up. I can't see out, only hear. I'm not convinced that this is an animal, or that it's left us, so I leap out of the tent to try to spot from the direction of the last recognition. Nothing. I try to give it the benefit of the doubt that it maybe is an animal, so I'm searching for reflective eyes. From raccoon hunting, I know some animals are smart enough to close their eyes if they see a spotlight scanning towards their direction, to not move or give the location. Knowing this, I use a rapid scanning technique and would even kill the light and then turn it back on in a different location to catch it off guard. Nothing. I figure that maybe it's just the angle I'm looking at. I probably can't see it, so I traveled 10 to 15 yards past the site where I heard the last step and looked back toward the tent. Nothing. I looked behind every boulder, tree, and up into the trees in case it climbed and I somehow didn't hear it. Nothing. I searched the entire campsite, including a 10 to 15 meter radius outside of the campsite, and couldn't find anything. I didn't even hear anything while I was searching. I figured whatever it was probably long gone and I should just go back to bed. I returned to the tent with my sleeping girlfriend. This time I opened the front of the rainfly so I can see out. Not but 30 to 45 minutes later, I hear the damn footsteps again, this time from beyond the bear box. Shit, there's only two parts of this story that I have some uncertainty about, and this is one. Looking through the mesh screen of my tent in the direction of the footsteps, this time beyond the bear box, I thought I saw a little red light, circular in shape, only for a split second. I immediately turned on my headlamp and jumped back out of the tent. A dead sprint into the area. Again, nothing. I searched the entire premises. This time with greater emphasis on the area, I heard it and saw that little red light. Still nothing. The sound of footsteps disappeared each time I exit the tent. At this time, I'm sure this thing's taunting me. I stand on a little boulder in the same area I last heard it, as not to make any noise from my own feet touching the gravel rock chips. I then kill my headlamp. I stand in complete darkness on silence. I can't see 3 inches in front of my face. I'm listening for anything. A single snap of a twig, a breath, a shuffling of a pebble. And I will have that spotlight on it in a heartbeat. After a long 1 to 2 minutes of standing there in darkness, I begin to hear footsteps coming down the mountain. On the main trail, Colima, off in the distance, west of the campsite, heading east toward the campsite. And I remember thinking to myself, who would be hiking down the trail at this time? It's got to be 2:33 in the morning. And also, doing it in the complete darkness. I knew the trail's route because I had hiked it to get to the campsite in the first place. I knew from the layout I should have been about to at least see a little headlamp or lamp off in the distance as it traveled down the path. But no, only footsteps. I go back to the tent. My girlfriend has been in and out of sleep for most of the skirmish. But seeing how distraught I am from this experience, she asks me if I would like to pack up camp and head back to the park's headquarters. I try to reassure her because I know she's only says this because she loves me, not because she believes something other than an animal is out there or because she actually wants to make a 4.5-mile hike back to the mountain via switchbacks, around to the back side of the mountain, down the mountain via switchbacks, around through a valley to get to the side of another mountain, then finally down a straight path back to the headquarters in the dark at 3:30 in the morning. I tell her it's not necessary and try to fall back to sleep. But the fucker isn't done yet. 10-15 minutes later, I hear footsteps approaching from behind the tent again, like in the first occurrence. I waste no time and immediately get out of the tent. As soon as I open that zipper on the tent, I hear it retreating back into the woods, and I run off into the woods after it. But, of course, there's still nothing there. I know better not to venture off too far. I stay in a 30-meter radius of the tent. I throw rocks in various areas to try to get whatever it is to move and make another sound, now that I'm out of the tent. And still nothing. At this point, I had enough. I wake my girlfriend up again and tell her, we gotta go. We pack everything up in roughly 10 to 15 minutes. It's now 4 in the morning. As we hike down the little path back to the main Coloma Trail, I ask her, we can turn left hiking east and go to the direction that I heard the steps retreat into, or right, hike west, and go back the same way we came. She said right, and I'm glad she did. She led the way using my phone as a light with me 5 to 10 feet behind her with a 30mm headlamp, and armed with a knife. We didn't make it past campsite 3 when I heard footsteps sprinting towards us from behind, trying to catch up. I quickly turned around, fully prepared to protect mine and my girlfriend's life. Hunting stops and the creature keeps a safe distance outside of the headlamp's reach. We keep moving. Our own footsteps muffle out much of what we can hear at this point, but every so often I hear its steps reassuring me that we are being followed. What worried me the most is that this small hike was made after being told by park rangers that the 4-day hike that we wanted to do was too dangerous given the current heat and lack of water conditions, so no one knew where exactly we were at this time. I had my girlfriend try to send messages to a family member of the name of the trail, Coloma to Laguna, that we were on, but no signal at the time. Luckily, I have GPS watch as I tracked our location during the entire route back. However, it would be a futile effort if the watch could relay the info to a cloud-based system via my phone's connection. We eventually got service as we approached the top of the mountain, and the message was sent. We were about a mile in, and we're still being followed. I would periodically hear conversation too, short 2 to 3 word commands, knowing that we may not make it out alive. I made sure to create as much of a trail as possible, dragging one of my feet, dragging the hand through the dirt and powder if it was reachable. The fowlers kept a safe distance away. It was going down the mountain via the switchback that worried me the most. I figured they were keeping their distance to cut a switchback and jump in front of us again. The entire way back, I made sure to keep scanning the perimeter, looking back up the switchback before proceeding, looking up and down through the shrubbery. Second part of uncertainty while traveling down the switchbacks on one occurrence as I looked back up before continuing traveling down the mountain, I saw a face enter the light of my headlamp 30 meters away, as if it were hunched over, leaning, and only wanted its face visible. Beard gray, opaque, pale white, skin with human-like characteristics. The face was young, no wrinkles, with feminine-like features, but unable to determine sex, androgynous, head only, about 4.5 to 5.5 feet off the ground, narrow jawline, sharp facial features, high cheekbones. No facial blemishes, acne, scarring, deformity, or any other imperfections. Very symmetrical face. Thin lips, no reflective eyes. Eyes were all black, no whites to the eyes at all. No facial hair, no hair at all that I could see. No eyebrows, completely bald. And it slowly smiled at me, kind of maliciously, as it came into the light. Taunting as if it wanted me to see it and maybe chase it. The grayness could have come from the light or my imagination, as my blood is flooded with adrenaline at this point, and all I want to do is get my girlfriend out of there and back to safety. But finally the visual, a part of me wanting to sprint towards it and confront it, but out of the safety of my girlfriend and my life, I wasn't going to attempt anything rash. Throughout the 4.5-mile trip back to headquarters, we were followed for 4 miles. They stopped following us. As the sun began to rise over that span, I heard 3 accounts of short conversations, but we made it to safety. Not sure what we experienced that night, but I don't think we would have been alive to tell the tale if we had stayed there. In the end, I think there were 2 subjects hunting us, not one, due to the discrepancies in the areas. The footsteps came from around the camp, and the short conversations that were being held. I believe the air quotes hiker that was coming down the mountain at 3 a.m. in the morning could have been the second subject called in by the first
from the little red light. At the end of the day, I don't know if this was human or not. With my background and experience, I should have found them when searching the campsite head to toe, at least once out of the 3 times. It was not my first time hunting in the dark or looking for people hidden in the dark. The person would have to have been specially trained. Also, if it was a human, how could they see so well in complete darkness, sprinting through the woods without running into or tripping over anything? Unless they had night vision, but I doubt it. There's a few things that just don't add up. Today's final encounter. I grew up in the small foothills of eastern Kentucky where folklore and stories of haints and mountain monsters run rampant. Everyone has a cousin or uncle that saw Bigfoot while out hunting, or that aunt that swears she saw a ghost in the old high school that one time, so it's hard to discern what's the truth and what's fiction. Most of what I personally seen or heard while out in the mountains, I usually attribute to local wildlife. Have I seen anything that's unexplainable to my logical mind? Not yet. But I'm also not arrogant enough to think that these things don't exist. My small town, Dogman, is a known perpetrator of many mishappenings. I've heard stories of it killing chickens, trying to bust down doors, attack hikers, or just being a nuisance on someone's farm. I've also heard stories of it stalking those that live deep in the woods, coming to stare into their windows at night, or even protecting them from strangers that made their way onto their land at some point. The majority of these people like to tell booger stories, as they say. They like having a grand story to tell people, for attention or just the pleasure of telling it. I'm not sure of which, but a few are trustworthy, and they are usually the ones that will only tell their tale if asked. My grandfather was one of them. Yes, I know I sound biased because of my grandfather, but I have 6 uncles and an aunt that literally could make a living out of lies they tell about local cryptids, and I'm more than happy to call them liars. My grandfather, though, he was a very logical man. He was a skeptic in every cryptid, as well as spirits and ghosts, always looking for a logical explanation, and usually pissing off the storyteller as well by questioning everything. That's why I tend to believe him, because he never tried to lie to me and his other grandkids. If anything, he was always the voice of reason we ran to when we were scared. Once, when I was younger, I asked him if he had ever seen anything before, be it a ghost or a monster. I'd been hearing stories from my uncles all day about Bigfoot, haints, etc., and wanted to know his thoughts on it. He sat there for a minute, not even acknowledging my question, and when I was about to ask again in case he didn't hear me, he spoke. When he and my grandmother had first bought our family homestead, they had heard fantastical stories about monsters that roamed that part of the mountain and how evil they were. My grandmother was a little scared, but my grandfather said he just shook his head and went on. He figured that it was a few black bears that people had been hearing or seeing, or even some bobcats, and that he wasn't too worried about it. About 2 months into living there, sure enough, he had seen a mama bear and some cubs making their way up a mountain behind his house. So he didn't think much of it when he heard something pounding on his front door one night, scratching at it and trying to get in. He told me that he grabbed his shotgun before going to the door. He tried to look out the front window to see if he could catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever it was, but he could only see a large black shadow being cast on the porch. Being the fearless soul that he was, the man fought in World War II and was under General George S. Patton, so you can imagine what he's seen. He unlocked the door and swung it open, expecting a bear or even a person standing there. It was neither. What he saw that night still had him shook up when he told me the story, some odd 50 years later. He said that As the door swung open, he saw an extremely large humanoid standing there. It stood a good 6.5 feet, and it was slightly hunched over as it stood on the covered porch. Its arms were long, the hands reaching well past its bent knees, which were bending in the opposite direction of a human. He told me that it was covered in thick black hair, very dense and dark, and that it had a smell to it. It was like a mix of wet dog and raw sewage. Lastly, the face, or rather the head, was what brought him up short. He said it looked like a German shepherd's head had been placed on this large, hairy, human-shaped body, and that as he looked at it, it cocked its head sideways and looked back at him, its eyes showing fear and confusion. He told me that he pulled his gun up, and before his finger could hit the trigger, it took off, but not before he got a warning shot, right in its right calf muscle. He said the howl that came from it when he shot it scared him more than anything in his life, and he ran back inside, bolting the door closed. He stood there, listening as the cries and howls began to fade as it ran deeper into those mountains. Only he couldn't hear it anymore before he moved away from the door and went back. And he swore to me on all things he held dear that this would still show up sometimes, dragging his wounded leg across the porch as it came up to the door, but it never bothered again. He said it would come up to the door, sniff around, before growling softly and then taking off again. He told me that there are a lot of things in the woods that can hurt you, be it a beast or a plant, and a lot more that can scare you. But the thing that he saw that night was the scariest of them all, and that I best never go looking for it because I would woefully regret it if I came across it. My granddad has been gone for about 15 years now, and I still believe every word he told me that day. Does that prove the existence of such a creature? Maybe not. And the words of an old war vet wouldn't be enough to change the minds of some people, but to me, it's the realest story I've heard about this creature. I hope that someday someone can get enough actual documented proof, if only to prove what my grandfather went through and what he saw that night.
All right, guys, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I don't got too much to say to end the video with tonight because I am going to tend to my corned beef, cabbage, carrot, and potato dinner with my daughters. And we are going to jam out and watch the Gorillas, the band, live concert tonight on TV, and eat our dinner and play some Monopoly. So have a great night, guys. Stay safe, please. And may the Great Spirit watch over us all. May He guide us down that path we call life.